Capricorn Clark leaves court after testifying against her one-time boss, Sean Combs, after detailing how she claimed she was kidnapped, threatened with murder, and witnessed beatings of Cassie Ventura. I go through 13 explosive moments from Clark's testimony and how Combs' longtime rival Suge Knight and later 50 Cent and Jay-Z came up.
Today, we've got a shocking and disturbing story that has completely taken over the internet and shaken the music industry to its core. Diddy lost it in court after his former assistant came forward and revealed disturbing details about alleged freak-offs and instances of violence that happened behind closed doors. This is the kind of revelation that doesn't just trend for a day or a week.
Capricorn Clark worked for Sean Combs for years, and the stories she told the jury sound like something out of a mafia movie. Clark was on the stand for the entire day to kick off the third week of Sean Combs' sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy trial. Combs has pleaded not guilty to all of those charges, and he maintains he's innocent. He's also charged with transportation for purposes of prostitution. And he says he's not guilty of that, too. Now, Capricorn Clark is just one of a number of employees of Combs to testify. She was close to Combs and Cassie Ventura, and she saw a lot, and she went through a lot. Capricorn Clark's name had come up earlier in the trial. In fact, Kid Cudi testified it was Clark who called him in December of 2011 and told him that she was with Sean Combs and that Combs had broken into his house with one of his security people. Clark told the jury about that day. She said she was kidnapped, taken by Combs to Kid Cudi's home against her will, and Combs was armed. Now, under cross-examination by Combs' attorney, Mark Agnifilo, Clark got some digs in at Cassie, and the defense scored some points. I'll get into that later. But let's start at the very beginning. Capricorn Clark said she first met Sean Combs in 2002, and she said she and Combs were super platonic friends. Then in 2004, she started working as his personal assistant. And like other employees before her, Clark said working for Sean Combs was not easy. In fact, on her first day of work, Capricorn Clark said that Sean Combs made a threat to her involving murder. Clark told the jury that Combs and one of his security guys, Uncle Paulie, took her to Central Park at 9 p.m. and questioned her about working for Suge Knight, the former CEO of Death Row Records. Clark had worked for Knight, who's now serving a 28-year sentence for manslaughter in California. Clark testified that Combs, quote, told me that he didn't know that I had anything to do with Suge Knight and that if anything happened, he would have to kill me. Clark said Combs was calm and she thought he was very serious because she felt there was some gravitas to the fact that he had had issues with Suge. Those were her words. Clark said that was just the very beginning. When this was happening, Clark said that Uncle Paulie was nearby and he was stoic. Despite the threat, Clark said she continued to work for Sean Combs because she felt she could have been more transparent about her work history with Suge Knight. Seriously. When asked, Clark also detailed how she heard Sean Combs talk about guns. Once it happened when she was his personal assistant.
This is the kind of scandal that could redefine an era, destroy careers, and force a long overdue reckoning in an industry that has too often protected its biggest names. It started when Diddy's ex-assistant, a person who had been by his side for years, finally decided to break their silence. In a packed courtroom, in a moment that felt like it could have been ripped out of a movie, this person came forward and laid it all out. They spoke openly about disturbing parties that came to be called freak-offs. Nights when lines weren't just blurred, they were completely erased. According to the assistant, these weren't isolated incidents or moments of bad behavior. This was a pattern, a routine, an open secret that too many people ignored or refused to acknowledge. The assistant talked about the pressure, the intimidation, and the ways younger people were brought into these situations, often with promises of stardom, connections, or opportunities. What started as a party would quickly evolve into something darker.
Clark said she allowed the man to conduct the lie detector test. Clark testified, I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't pass this test, and I felt the test was the only way to get through this thing. She was asked, can you describe how the test is administered? Clark said, they strap some stuff to your chest and they strap some stuff to your arms, and they ask you a series of questions over and over again. She was asked, what types of questions were you asked? Clark said, did I steal the jewelry? Did I come up with an idea to steal the jewelry? Did I plan with somebody to steal the jewelry? Had I ever stolen from him? Just a lot of stealing-centric questions. Clark was then asked, from him, was that Mr. Combs? Clark said yes. She was then asked, did this man tell you the results of the test? Clark said, they said they were inconclusive. She was then asked, what, if anything, did the man tell you about them, the results being inconclusive? Clark said, it's like, I'm not getting a good reading. You need to calm down. You're going to be in the East River if I can't get a reading on this. Clark was asked, when he told you to calm down, how had you been reacting in that moment? Clark responded, I couldn't calm down. I wasn't doing a good job at calming down. Clark said she was with the men for a full workday, and the test was administered intermittently throughout the day. And it didn't go on for just one day. This went on for 5 days. Each day, Clark testified Uncle Paulie would pick her up and take her back to the 6th floor of the building, and the lie detector test would continue. Clark said she didn't like the threats about being tossed in the East River, and she wanted to prove her innocence. Eventually, Clark said she returned to work, and she was never told whether the jewelry was found, and her boss, Sean Combs, never asked where she had been. Capricorn Clark said working for Sean Combs was hard. Workdays were typically 9 a.m. to 4 a.m. The day would start at his home, getting him a carnation for his suit, printing out documents, researching something he had on his mind, roll calls, and getting him food, basically anything that needed to be done. And if you didn't get it done, you would lose your job. And Combs let his employees know that, according to Clark. She said she didn't get breaks to eat, and on a good night, she'd get 4 hours of sleep. On a bad night, 2. Now, things got so bad from stress, Clark said she developed alopecia, and that's a condition where you actually lose your hair. It just falls out of your head. Clark said she was making $65,000 per year, and she went to HR, and overtime pay was calculated for 3 months. Clark said HR determined she was owed $80,000, and when Combs saw that on a piece of paper, he simply ripped it up. Clark also booked hotel rooms and set them up for Sean Combs and Kim Porter. She said Combs traveled with a camera box. It had a small camera, a small bottle of baby oil, and a bottle of lube. She also packed his Louis Vuitton toiletry bag, which had ecstasy in it.
Situations where people felt trapped, where saying no felt like it wasn't an option. The testimony shook the room, and it shook Diddy himself. According to those inside the court, as soon as the assistant started sharing details, Diddy completely lost it. He slammed the table, yelled at his lawyers, and refused to stay calm, making it clear that the walls he had built around himself for so long were starting to crack. For years, whispers circulated about Diddy and the culture that surrounded him. There were stories about secret parties, about behavior that crossed lines, about an inner circle that protected itself at any cost. But those were just whispers, rumors that were buried, ignored, or dismissed. What came out in court felt different. This was someone from inside the circle, someone who witnessed these moments firsthand, someone who knew too much to stay silent any longer. The internet exploded almost instantly.
Getting IV drips. I asked, he related it similar to serotonin supplements because ecstasy depletes your serotonin. It's just replenishing us from partying over the weekend. Clark was asked, from the drugs? She answered yes. Clark also testified about how Sean Combs described his relationship with Cassie Ventura. She described a time in 2010 when Combs called Cassie into his kitchen and told her, grab this, grab that, hand me that, turn around. You get the drift. Clark said Cassie Ventura followed each and every instruction. Then Combs said, did you see that? He said, you B words won't do that. That's why you don't have a man. To which we said, you mother effing right. Clark said she saw Combs use drugs, including Molly, and during her time working for him, he also used prescription drugs, and she testified that she actually bought them for him at times. And when they were in France, he wanted cocaine. Clark said she didn't want to buy the cocaine because that's how her mother had passed away, so she had some Spanish security guards buy it for him. And get this, Clark said she would actually get prescription drugs for Sean Combs in Miami under her own name when he exceeded the amount he could get for himself in Miami Beach. Clark also told the jury that Sean Combs would sometimes come back from Europe with 100,000 euros in cash from overseas bookings, and that money would always go in the safe in his house. Then in 2006, she said Sean Combs got violent with her at his home in Miami, charging her and pushing her when she said, I hate it here, after the chef told her they were out of turkey bacon and the chef told Combs what she had said. Now, after this incident, Capricorn Clark left her job with Sean Combs, but then came back in 2011. Clark was Cassie Ventura's manager at that point, but not working directly with Sean Combs. But Combs had approval, she said, over everything having to do with Cassie, her schedule, her hair, her makeup, everything. Then the testimony turned to December of 2011 and Kid Cudi. Cassie Ventura was dating Kid Cudi in 2011, and she said one day, Cassie wanted to bring him along on a hike. And Clark said she told Cassie via text that was a bad idea and she needed to delete that text. The text was on a Bad Boy Records issued phone, and Capricorn Clark was concerned about Sean Combs finding out. So Capricorn Clark said she bought Cassie a burner phone because, quote, the way she was moving, she was going to get us all killed. That drew an objection, which was sustained. Next, Capricorn Clark moved to the early morning of December 22nd, 2011. She testified she awoke to Sean Combs banging on her door with what sounded like metal. Clark said she opened her door and Combs had a gun in his hand, and he walked in and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" Then he said, "Get dressed. We are going to kill this N-word." Clark said she told Sean Combs she didn't want to go, and he responded, "I don't give an F-word. What you want to do, go get dressed." At this point, she testified the gun was in his waistband. Clark said she didn't try to escape because he was livid and, quote, I had never seen anything like this before. He had never come to my house, and the entire time I had known him, I've never seen him with a weapon. I've never seen him making me do something like this. Clark said she didn't have a choice, and they went in a black SUV to...
Social media platforms were flooded with posts, tweets, and videos as people tried to make sense of what was happening. Fans, journalists, activists, everyone weighed in. The reactions were a mix of anger, heartbreak, and disgust. Anger at the idea that such behavior could have gone on for so long. Heartbreak for the victims, many of whom may never have felt safe to speak out until now. Disgust at the sheer audacity of those in positions of power who use that power to manipulate, to control, and to hurt others. For Diddy, this is more than just a PR crisis. This is more than a headline that can be spun or a scandal that can be buried. This is the kind of revelation that can dismantle a reputation built over decades. The man who built Bad Boy, shaped the careers of countless artists, and became one of the biggest names in music now finds himself facing the biggest test of his life. Will he be able to survive this? Will more people come forward? Will this lead to formal charges, lawsuits, or long overdue justice? Those are the questions everyone is asking right now. Meanwhile, the assistant has become a symbol of courage for many. Speaking out about a person as powerful and connected as Diddy is not a decision made lightly. It can come with serious consequences, both professionally and personally. Yet in that courtroom, with the world watching, this person chose to tell their truth. And that decision could set the stage for a wave of revelations from others who have been holding on to their stories, too afraid until now to step into the light. The impact of this moment is already being felt far beyond the walls of the courthouse.
This is before Brian Steele, Sean Combs' defense attorney, began the cross-examination of her. So she's testifying under direct. And my understanding is it was a lot of discussion about alleged threats that were made by Sean Combs, right?
Yeah, there were. So when Mia comes to the stand today, it was kind of the same as yesterday, where she kept her head down. She kind of had her bangs in front of her face, and she just kind of walked to the witness stand because the witnesses go to the stand before the jury is brought in for the beginning of the day. So she comes back in. Her support system is kind of behind her, as well as what we presume to be her attorneys, too, because they're normally in the suits. But she walks straight to the witness stand, takes a seat, but kind of has that same effect that she had yesterday, where she was keeping her head down from what I could see, even while on the witness stand. But I will say, Jesse, even when she was testifying today, I felt like her tone was a little different. Now, yesterday was a very heavy day. They discussed a lot during her direct testimony, at least for day one, and they really discussed a lot of heavy topics, specifically the sexual abuse allegations. She was very emotional on the stand. But I will say this about her today. She kind of spoke a little bit more with an upbeat, if I could say that word, to kind of describe her demeanor just while she was on the stand, as opposed to yesterday, where she was very quiet, soft-spoken, raspy at times, and emotional. But just as far as just some of the threats that were made to her, the government kind of pointed out an incident back in October of 2015 when Mia was down in Cape Town, South Africa with Cassie while Cassie was filming a movie. And so Diddy had told her to go to South Africa, according to Mia's testimony. However, Cassie caught Diddy cheating on her. There is a video posted online. This video is with Puffy or Diddy, along with Diddy's girlfriend, Gina. And so Mia had said that Cassie was devastated by this and that Cassie stopped answering Diddy's calls. So Diddy had Christina Korum and other staff members try to get Cassie on the phone. So we see an exhibit photo from October 26th of 2015. It's a text exchange between Christina Korum and Mia. Christina Korum's like, hey, it's KK. Did you get these? PD wants to talk to you. Sorry, messenger, don't shoot. Mia's essentially saying, I tried to call him. Christina Korum said, well, you can call me first. The audio call is not completed. And then they kind of talk about how Mia was getting all these kind of incessant phone calls from not only Christina Korum, but also Diddy just trying to get in touch with her. She says that at times she was sleeping, there was a time difference. And so
It's prompting a much-needed conversation about accountability within the music industry, an industry that has long turned a blind eye to its biggest stars, allowing them to operate with impunity while others suffered in silence. The questions now being asked aren't just about Diddy. They're about every person who enabled, protected, or ignored behavior that caused harm. They're about every structure that prioritized money and image over basic humanity and decency. As this story continues to unfold, one thing is certain: this is far from over. The assistant's testimony has opened a door that can't be closed. It has sparked anger, reflection, and a demand for change that goes far beyond one man or one court case. Whatever the outcome, this is a pivotal moment, one that will be remembered for years to come. Fans are making their voices heard louder than ever. The hashtag campaigns have started. The threads and long-form posts detailing moments, connections, and long-suspected stories have surfaced. People are sharing old interviews, breaking down moments where Diddy acted in ways that felt off, and connecting the dots in ways that weren't possible before. What started as a single witness statement has become a collective examination.
When I looked at those pictures last night, it fits the picture that the prosecution's building through the testimony. So and that's what the marriage between the investigators and the prosecutors are all about. The prosecutors want to build this narrative, paint this story, and the federal agents go out and get the paint and the brushes so that the prosecutors can paint the story in the courtroom. And so when you look at those pictures, they're corroborating the witnesses who said, we had this kind of stuff. We had baby oil. We had Astroglide. Sure enough, there's the Astroglide in the picture in his house. There's the baby oil in his closet. So again, it's like perfect stuff to corroborate and bolster the testimony that you're going to have. I liken it to the paint and the brush, and then you give that stuff to the prosecutors who paint the picture in the courtroom.
There are some items too that stood out to me, and if you could just take us into the mind of one of the agents during this raid, because there's a ton of these like high heel platform shoes, and to the untrained eye, you could be like, well, this guy, he just lives kind of a fast life, and here's just a ton of shoes, and he's rich, and he just has them in the house. How do you know? Certainly based off the stories and the evidence you have going in, but how do you know to look for items that are not illegal, but they play into something that you're arguing is illegal when it gets to trial?
Yeah, well, on the federal level, we were always kind of working with the prosecutors early on in the investigation, whereas sometimes the locals kind of don't meet the prosecutors till after an arrest. So during the investigation, you're working with your prosecutors. In fact, to get a search warrant, you go to the U.S. Attorney's Office and work with an assistant U.S. attorney to get that search warrant. So that the narrative that the prosecutors are going to build in the courtroom already starts early on in the investigation. So when you go to execute a search warrant, you kind of know what you're looking for. In fact, there's a constitutional requirement of specificity in a search warrant. You have to kind of list the things that you're going to seize, and it's kind of listed in the search warrant. And, so it depends on the crime alleged, and the search warrant will say, we believe evidence of these particular crimes are in this, so if you're talking about sex trafficking and you're talking about, sexual blackmail and things like that is the narrative, then when you come across, these shoes that kind of, maybe exotic dancers a lot of times will use, and those kind of shoes, when you're talking about the narrative of these freak offs, which they already knew when they executed the search warrant. They knew about the freak offs and they knew they were going to be a part of the story.
Nation of a system that has failed too many for too long. For Diddy, this may be the biggest test of his life. Will he be able to maintain any version of his legacy after this? Will he continue to fight, denying every claim? Will he try to shift the narrative? Or will the sheer weight of the evidence overwhelm any attempt at damage control? Whatever path he chooses, one thing is clear. This is a pivotal moment, not just for him, but for an entire industry grappling with its own complicity. And as this story develops, we'll be right here following every beat, every new piece of evidence, every word said in court, every reaction online. Because this isn't just about one man or one scandal anymore. It's about a culture of silence that has persisted for too long, and about a shift that could redefine what accountability looks like for an industry that has shaped generations. So stay tuned, stay aware, and stay engaged. This is far from over, and the next chapter in this saga may be the one that changes everything. Let us know in the comments what you think about this shocking turn of events. Do you stand with the assistant? Do you think Diddy can come back from this? What does this say about the music industry as a whole? Share your thoughts, because this is a conversation that needs to be had, and it's happening right now.